I think anytime you use wine as a device to elevate yourself at the expense of someone else, that you're betraying the spirit of the juice. The juice is intended to bring us together and not separate us. I think that the intellectualization of wine and the use of wine as a way to enhance one's status and one's importance is contrary to the spirit of the grape.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today in beautiful Southern California. Yes, the man has tasted 100,000 wines, sold 17 million bottles, but not why we're here. Here to have a conversation with Ross Halleck. Halleck.
Correct.
Ross Halleck.
That's right.
A vintner up in Sebastopol. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we were just talking about Eric Schwartzman, a marketeer and author of a digital marketing book, and how he brought us together to have this show. And the other point that I thought was really interesting was your article that you wrote, which was mostly about, or seemed to be right on par with what I feel about the wine trade and what wine is and shall be and will always be. But let's talk about a little bit. How did you stumble across this such a romantic viewpoint of wine? And I'll tell the listeners about it in a second. But how did you stumble across this? What got you involved with this crazy industry?
Well, now are we talking about this viewpoint of wine, or are we talking about this crazy industry?
Well, I was trying to use that as a lead into how you got started without saying, hey, how'd you get started?
Well, I guess I chose wine as my drug of choice in my mid-20s. There was certainly plenty to choose from, and I wasn't shy about experimenting. Fortunately, I don't have an addictive personality, so wine held my attention. I am I'm curious by nature, and wine is one of those things that if you have curiosity, you will never find the end to unraveling its mysteries. And
it's kind of funny because I had a terribly addictive personality as growing up, and we seem to be of the relatively same generation. And it took me a long time for wine to be part of my lifestyle, despite the fact that I grew up with it. My dad had a store in the 70s and all that, but it took me well into my 10 years or 12 years into this trade before I realized how romantic and how important the beverage was. And here you are at 20,
mid-20s,
like even an early age compared to today's generation getting involved.
As I said, wine's been around a long time. It was in October of 2017, a clay pot was discovered in the Republic of Georgia with remnants of wine that dated 8,000 years old. Mm-hmm. So, as I said, if you are curious by nature, wine is one of those pursuits that will just keep you interested. And I also have always been a taster, and so there was something about the quality of wine with food that I was introduced to at a young age, mid-20s, that held my attention.
Was it part of your family lifestyle?
No, I grew up on Mogan David. It was definitely not.
No, the quintessential. I fail to have any Mogan David in my cellar, though we used to sell it at my dad's shop. But
well, it was what we had for Passover, and I never really liked it.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, okay, so the big difference between being interested in wine pairing, and I have a whole opinion about wine food pairing, but a big difference between that and saying, look, I think I want to venture into this and try and do it. And the reason I bring this up, and it's a pretty common subject amongst vintners and property owners like yourself, this is a huge step, and it takes a lot of energy and wine and passion to do this. And there's a huge, chasm between, I like wine and talking to your friends about it and having a good glass at a dinner table with a steak or something. But wow, when did the bug come to you that I thought, well, I think I'm going to try this?
Well, I don't think the bug came to me in the way that you suggest. I was working I had a marketing agency in Silicon Valley, and it was because I liked wine. My efforts were bifurcated between high technology and the wine industry. So I was working with lots of wineries up in Sonoma and Napa County, and I was working with HP and Apple and Sun Microsystems and, literally hundreds of startup, technology companies going back and forth between Silicon Valley and wine country. And, I just decided that at a certain point that I'd rather commute to Silicon Valley and live in wine country than live in Silicon Valley and commute to wine country. So I bought a house up here, just a big house on a big undeveloped piece of property. And it was in an area that was not considered wine country at the time. It was in West Sebastopol. We can see the ocean from the top of our property. There were no vineyards around here. And I thought I thought I'd like to live on a vineyard, and it was cheaper than a lawn, to be perfectly frank. And so I thought, well, I could, if I put a vineyard in, I get to live on a vineyard. I can make garage wine if I want to, or I can sell the fruit if it's good enough, and help pay for my then infant son's college education. It was kind of a fantasy idea. And we were fortunate, and we won #1 Pinot Noir in North America, our very first vintage.
What?
And I would just like to say that it's better to be lucky than smart.
That is, wow, I don't know what that says. It says, wow, what an incredible farmer. And living the dream, or is there something wrong with the judges that were just that they didn't recognize?
I call it the vine intervention.
Oh no, that's funny. I like that, divine intervention. Mm-hmm. Well, what did that happen when you did that? You just thought, wow, we really got something going on, or like, what? Are you serious? Though you probably loved the wine. You probably had no expectations that it would do so well.
No, it was both of those things. It was like, what? And, I had a marketing background. I had a, small agency in Silicon Valley. And I thought, well, gosh, winning #1 Pinot Noir in the United States is a great way to build a brand. Mm-hmm. And literally, had I known all that I know now, how silly of an idea that was, I never would have done it.
That leads to a huge Pandora's box full of philosophy in this industry, but it's a very important part of this, and I think even more today than in previous years, because back then when you did that, the idea of the Spectator and Robert Parker, those guys were important. People were following them, and ratings were coming into. I always look at the Wine of the Month Club when I ran for 32 years, and my father ran for 15, and we were rating wines and picking wines based on their value long before any of the services started to do it. That's how smart we are when it comes to marketing, mm-hmm. because we could have, used that as one of our pendulums. But regardless, it's not as fashionable today. Seems to be losing a little bit of ground to other forms of wine marketing, other forms of wine presentation to the generations. But back then, it must have been very important to have that accolade, despite the marketing headwinds.
Well, I like to say winning #1 Pinot Noir, and at that time, maybe $3 bought you a cup of coffee at Starbucks.
Yeah, right.
The truth of all of these awards.
I just got that.
The truth of all of these awards, unless you have the money to promote it, once you get it, it's gone. And so there's a joke in the wine industry that everybody laughs at when they hear it, unless they are actually living it. And that's how to make a small fortune in the wine business is you start with a large fortune. And we didn't. Yeah. And so
I had the luxury of Kevin O'Leary saying the same joke on this mm-hmm. podcast. So yeah. you're in good hands with, the venture capitalists of the world saying that. But yeah, I think you're right. And though I just published something from Pierre-Olivier Clouet, who's the winemaker at Cheval Blanc, and you should go back and look on LinkedIn and listen to it because he's talking about that very thing. And I wrote as a little side note, I said, yeah, if you're LVMH, you have all the money in the world to promote a brand, then you're in a luxury position. Not too many people are like that. However, that doesn't mean you don't stay the course of what you're trying to do and go to the other side, like go to the dark side of Star Wars, and that is becoming a shelf item, sugared up, try to fit in and compete mainstream with everything out there, which I think is a death trap as well, because all those brands are heavily funded. So in your case, when you got this award and you went to market it, you just fell on deaf ears. What happened?
Well, we just did the hard work. We went out and we told people, and we continued to make good wine. We've now been judged best of class or number one Pinot Noir in North America 5 times. And
wow, congratulations.
We're out there telling people about it, sharing our wines. After 25 years, there's a certain word of mouth. And fortunately for us, we've had a lot of accolades from the press, but we're also the only winery in Sonoma and Napa County today that has over 500 Google reviews with a 5-star rating. And so the people who are trying our wines now are the ones they're the arbiters of taste. And we're grateful for that because the truth of the matter is, in most of the publications and the world that we grew up in, despite claims to the contrary, it was always pay to play. And you got better scores if you were advertising. It was just the nature of the beast. And since we couldn't play that game, there's been a certain leveling of the playing field in the current environment, and we've been a beneficiary of that.
That's an interesting thought. It's true. You used to see in certain accolades in certain magazines, and you also saw certain full-page ads on the same wines, and it just seems to be. And I think those trade journals were discredited for that kind of business approach. But I think the consumer today, which is what I'm reading about and what I'm watching, doesn't care anyway. And so those journals are only, representing the people that of our generation, possibly maybe the one after us, but not the current generation. They're not reading these things. And this is one of the issues with the trade in general, is like, where's it going to go? And I'm getting tired of reading overthought, over-intellectualized, over-academic articles about, where to go next with it, because no one knows the answer. And since you're a marketeer, was this unexpected when you took this to the street, or was this persistent requirement to get your name out, to build that brand, constantly doing it, which is what you do every day to keep the brands in front of people? Is that a surprise to you in this industry?
Was what a surprise? The fact that
the idea that you had to be out there. Yeah, well, yeah, I suppose that's part of it, but you had to be out there shaking the tree all the time.
I think that it was sobering. Because when we got into this business, there were a few outliers out there that were at Costa Brown, neighbors of ours, are a perfect example, that, were able to hit it big relatively quickly because of scores. And we were getting good scores, but it wasn't clicking quickly. And fortunately, I love what I do. And so the work was just a natural function of being passionate about what I do. So we just kept at it. So now 25 years later, we're still out there beating the bushes, and fortunately we have Google on our side. We're super fortunate about that. And I guess Google now is taking the place of Lauby and and the other, pundits that made success for our predecessors.
That's an interesting thought. That the digital review, which is really the general public. When I travel, I don't use Yelp. I don't use Foursquare. I use Michelin because it's at least a cohesive baseline point of view, and everybody works for Michelin that reviews, and they have some kind of camaraderie amongst themselves, and they have a baseline of what a 1-star or Gourmand or whatever rating you get represents. But Google and Foursquare and Yelp and all that stuff is really the general public, which I think is the direction these kinds of things are going. So I have friends that only use Yelp when they go to a restaurant. I'm like, well, I don't care what some other guy thought. I only care about what I think when I'm done with it. But I think it's an important feature. Did you find that marketing, since you were in high tech, and what year was that you were in Silicon Valley, or years?
Well, I moved to Sonoma County 35 years ago, but I commuted for over 10 years. So I would say that I left Silicon Valley in full around 2005, 2006. And
so you were there in the 80s.
Oh yeah, I was there in the 80s.
Wow. Well, I had a software company in the 80s, early 85, 86, and I was in Silicon Valley selling stuff to a couple of large organizations, not namely HP was one of them. Remember waiting in the lobby for David, was his name Kern? Was that his name? No, that was the Xerox president. Anyway,
David Packard.
Did you find then the idea of moving from general marketing, high tech, corporate America to, vending a one-man show at that point, a wine? Did you find any synergy in the marketing efforts and the marketing requirements of switching?
I think marketing is a horizontal discipline. So if you have some sense of how to change people's behavior, which is sort of the kind of the stock and store of a marketer, you can apply that across any industry. That said, the wine industry has some peculiarities, as every industry does, and there was some crossover, in the general sense. But I would say that to be successful in the wine industry, you really have to know the wine industry.
I had a kid on the show, a kid. I guess anybody younger than me is a kid. But if I had a young man on the show who is a MIT Masters of Business Administration, and not his primary trade is investment capital, I think. But he felt the calling to bring Armenian wines to America. And one of the first comments we discussed and that we agreed on was that when he brought these Masters of Business School techniques to the wine trade, they had almost no value. I mean, certainly the mechanics and the logistics of it were important, but the idea of selling an emotional product like wine didn't seem to fit in it was like a round peg in a square hole, or vice versa.
Well, I think that there's some general principles in marketing that apply, as I said, across all industries. But wine is by nature mystical, and I think that there's a certain surrender that one has to adopt when they step into the wine business, because of its mystical nature, and because if you're competing against people that are just doing it for business reasons, and you have passion behind you, there's no competition. That if you're in wine exclusively for business reasons, against someone like us who is in it for passion, then people are going to get that. And I think the reason we're thriving right now in a time when the industry is struggling is because people are looking for authenticity, and they're looking for something that touches their hearts. And I think that now, granted, we're at a very, very small scale, so you can't compete. You can't compare us to Kendall Jackson or to Rombauer or any of the big brands, because they're really in a different business than we are.
They are.
But I do think that when you bring your heart into something and you have the ability to touch other people's hearts, that they respond with support.
Is it hard to translate that passion? I mean, I did this for 35 years, DTC, and it was, we used to, when we first started, I would stand at a booth for 12 hours a day, and we would do it virtually every weekend of the year, and sometimes 10, 12 days in a row at a fair. So it's easy there to shake somebody's hand and express the passion it takes that we exhibited to produce the selections that we produced. And we really did taste 300 to 500 wines a month. We really did select the best values. We really did negotiate sort of on behalf of the client to get the best deal for the particular wine. So transmitting the passion was natural. It was a firm handshake. But digitally, it's much more difficult. Is that from your marketing background? How did you convey this, or how are you conveying this passion to the people? Or in other words, the Google reviews you get, what are they saying?
Well, they say that the Google's reviews come from people who visit us. So, I would say the percentage of our business that comes like from the internet, like just, e-commerce, is a very, very small percentage of our business. And most of it comes through word of mouth. People just don't discover us online and go, oh, they have a bunch of 5-star reviews, let's buy their wine. What they do is they discover that we have a bunch of 5-star reviews and they come visit us. And so I would say, most of our business is as a result of personal connection.
Well, I think that's why you're doing so well. I think from what I read, what I do, and what I've done, and the people I talk to in very similar positions you are, and then, like I said, I had Cheval Blanc on the show. But I think that the wine trade is headed in the direction it was when my father was selling wine in 1975 in a wine shop after the Judgment of Paris in 76, 77, actually till 86. And that was the experiential part of wine. And what I mean by that is we didn't just have a wine shop, people come in. My dad was president of Les Amis de Vin, this patch right here. And they would have dinners, and Robert Mondavi would speak, and Lawrence Bowser, and Harry Waugh. And these guys would come and speak, and that passion would come through at that moment. And that's how wine was built in America, post Judgment of Paris. So I think the experiential part of wine is coming back. And I think that the facelessness of digital marketing is collapsing. And let's say the word collapse is probably a little harsh, but it's getting so diluted that the return to market socially is very difficult to get profitable. So do people come and sign up for a club? Do you have a DTC club?
We do. We call it our inner circle. And, it's the majority of our business. I mean, I would say it's 80% of our business is our wine club. And then 20% are the finest restaurants and private clubs across the United States.
You're selling wholesale then?
We sell direct to trade. We have no distribution. So it is wholesale, yes, but it is not.
I have to say, you're in a very luxurious position, even though it's hard work. You're in control of what's going on, and I think that's the number one complaint today by generally anybody is, with the consolidation of distribution, and in Los Angeles alone, people, they're walking out of. I mean, they leave. R&DC's left California.
Yes.
Now, let's say you're one of the brands that they carried. Now you're scrambling looking for a book to be in, as opposed to what you're doing.
We had that experience in 2008, which is why we chose to do this. 2008, if you remember, the economy took a
That's right. The worst year I had until last year. It was the worst year I had until 2023.
Yeah. So we learned that lesson, and that's when we pulled out of all distribution, and we have since 2008 have been all direct to consumer and direct to trade.
So you wrote an article about drugs, psilocybin, modern day drugs, and I suppose alternative viewpoints in the world. These drugs that create alternative viewpoints. But you made a point about wine. Tell me what you were trying to say in that article.
Well, I'm going to correct you like straight up. And the article wasn't about drugs; it was about entheogens. And
Okay.
I'm going to make a very strong distinction between an entheogen and a drug, because an entheogen is a substance used in spiritual or religious practices to create an altered state of consciousness that for pursuit of a spiritual or a divine experience. And I wrote that article because I think wine originally was an entheogen. It was used as a and to this day is sacred in almost every religion in the world because of its ability to connect us, not only to each other but to spirit. And so we are performing wine as plant medicine ceremonies on a quarterly basis to bring people back, as you had said earlier, to a time when wine was not a social lubricant or a means of escape, but a means of connecting ourselves to God, for lack of a better word.
Well, I completely agree with that, and you'd think that the son of a pharmacist would know the difference between a drug and an entheogen, but
well, I think you're dating yourself a little bit, is what's going on.
Well, you can be that too. Let me see if I can articulate this, because I've had Bible scholars on the show that are going around the country and the world connecting wine and the fermentation of grapes to God and your soul. Now, maybe that's the indefinable part of wine. In other words, when I say colloquially, you don't do with a bottle of beer or a bottle of scotch or a bottle of bourbon that you do with a bottle of wine. It doesn't connect you to anything. It's to catch a buzz and maybe forget some of your worries. But wine has a different effect on the soul. And what is that connection? Well, I guess you could go into the soil and check the micronutrients and see how the tap roots are gathering these nutrients and expressing them in the grapes, but that's still only going to tell you what's happening, not why it's happening. And so there's something about wine that is ethereal.
Yeah, it's mystical is the word I use.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you feel something. It makes you connect something. Now, a proper glass of wine, a Halleck Pinot Noir, meaning, like, you're not going to get that from 19 Crimes. That's been, and to me, that's a defining factor. Like, if you're going to add sugar and mega red and all the things that go into the 76 chemicals you can put in a wine, well, that kind of defeats this mystical part of wine, right? It dilutes it and takes it away. But if you have a properly made wine that's honestly made from the earth, I think you're exactly right. I think it's intervention, divine intervention to divine, what'd you say? The vine intervention?
The vine, yes.
And so her name is Gisela, and she's got a partner, and they're just traveling the world making these comments. And when you think about it, you said they found wine in the amphora in Georgia. The Armenians found a 6,100-year-old winery complete with sandals. Mm-hmm. Certainly, they didn't have digital marketing then, but they said...
Well, you've got to guess it was in the realm of the shaman, the spiritual practitioner, the healer. And I've said it, it's sacred in almost every religion in the world, and it's because of this ability to connect us. And there's a book and even a series on Netflix by a gentleman named Michael Pollan called How to Change Your Mind that describes the effects of these entheogens tremendously influenced by set and setting. And that simply suggests that one's intention is an important part of one's experience. And so when we do these wine as plant medicine ceremonies, it is with the intention of the inner journey. So people close their eyes. There's not chatter. There's not an intention of being social. And the setting is surrounded by music and various techniques and shamanic practices that facilitate that inner journey.
I just got a call with Stephanie Morton Small, and she's got this product she's working on, or this forget wine pairing dinners, which I think, for my listeners, that they already know that I think it's not a hoax, but I think it's just superfluous wine stuff. Drink what you want. But she's got a thing called wine whisper and song, and it's exactly that. It's a connection. It's a human connection, emotional connection between wine and music, and this lack of chatter and noise around you. Just a thing, just an approach to it. And maybe that defines what happened to me the other day at a Bordeaux tasting, and we got to Barsac at the end, and I put my nose in the glass, and even after 100,000 wines tasted here, I was frozen with emotion. And I didn't know where it came from. I mean, I didn't know where it came from me. I know it came from the glass, but I didn't know where I mustered it up. And that can only be explained by what you're saying. How does that get in the glass?
Well, the whole concept, or the whole, the word mystery is just that.
Yeah,
we can't
you're right.
know. We cannot know. And the we cannot know is sadly lost in today's wine culture. When I sit on a panel with other vintners and somebody raises their hand and says, why is the wine in Sonoma County, why is the Pinot Noir in Sonoma County so extraordinary? And to a person, they'll say, oh, it's the fog. It's the fog comes in the evening and puts the babies to bed. And then the sun comes up in the morning and raises the sugars. And the difference between truth and fact is that if enough people say the same thing, it becomes fact. It's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
And I think not enough people recognize that we're in a dance with Gaia. This is much bigger than we can explain. And the humility that goes with just saying, I don't know, is lost in the wine business. And I think this mystical nature of wine and the kinds of things that we do in this wine ceremony really elevate this I don't know. And I think that's part of the beauty and the importance of wine in the human experience.
So is the wine industry itself propagating its, I'm not going to say destruction, maybe it's dilution, maybe it's, even though it's funny that you hear all those naysayers and all the problems on LinkedIn and other social networks about how bad the industry is. But in America, we've sold more and bought more cases than we did the year before. So that's probably a good thing. But do you think that the industry is burying itself with more periodicals, more conversation about character, more swirling and sniffing, and more intimidation, aristocracy to wine? I mean, it's a tough question because you and I live it every day. But based on what you're saying, if we could have those conversations, if we could explain how I put my nose in the glass of Barsac and I was frozen without any description, just frozen with emotion.
Why do we have to explain it? I mean, why can't we just enjoy it without having some compelling reason behind it, or some compelling need to explain why it happens. I think the experience of it is where the beauty is, not in the explanation.
So a woman came in today to taste me on some Central Coast Pinot. And, it was a typical sales call, just chattering about their production value and the production skills and the vineyard. And they show me pictures of the rustic vineyard they have. And then she showed me on the back label that they had put all the clones that they used. And I said, let me ask you a question. I said, what value is this to anybody? Does anybody care? She says, oh, we've had this discussion and we put it on there. I said, well, but these days, really, nobody wants to talk about what clone. I mean, I did this for a long time, and I wouldn't be able to tell you if you told me what clone you're using, what it brought to the table, or yeast that you were using. And maybe that's self-propagating to people that just get intimidated by this. And what you're saying is, let's not explain those things. Let's just enjoy the glass of wine and have a conversation around it and appreciate why we're connected by it.
100%. And I think anytime you use wine as a device to elevate yourself at the expense of someone else, that you're betraying the spirit of the juice.
Yeah.
The juice is intended to bring us together and not separate us. And I think that the intellectualization of wine and the use of wine as a way to enhance one's status and one's importance is contrary to the spirit of the grape.
It's making my mind wander through all the stuff I read and what I get so angry reading about. And partially what this podcast is for is to sort of try to tell some of these stories and at least present alternative viewpoints to, the mainstream part of it. And I'm having dinner tomorrow night with some friends. They're all wine, interested in wine. They like the stories. We went to Bordeaux together. And because of those experiences, they've become, I don't think the word sophisticated, they've just become more interested in understanding why I think it is about the why. I mean, I think anybody's final appreciation for a good glass of wine is why. Like, what, not why is it doing this to me, but why can I have these conversations? Why do I feel this way when I have a glass of wine? And why can we have a conversation at dinner time that's less guarded because of that? Interesting concept. So what do you do then to do this, to do your, how do you promote what you're doing? How do you promote having people experience what you're doing?
Well, I did a TED Talk on it.
Oh, you did? Oh, yeah. You know what? Eric told me that. Yes.
Yeah. But, we have a wine club and we have a mailing list. And so that's how we promote it, is we invite people to experience this. And it's, except for the fact of the digital component of having a mailing list, I mean, it becomes word of mouth. And I wrote an article recently in the Sonoma Independent Journal about wine is sacred. And, and in that is a link to my TED Talk. And, we've only done this 3 times. We have it scheduled on a quarterly basis to align with the Earth's rhythm. And it's growing each time, but it's not huge crowds. This is not like, buying a ticket to a concert. This is a self-selected group of people that want to explore something within themselves and something different as it relates to wine and their experience with wine.
So what would I experience if I showed up? If you allowed me to show up? What would it feel like?
It's not like we put a filter on this.
Yeah,
right. Mean, people choose to do it, and it's like any entheogen. If it calls to you, it's again a mystical kind of calling, and if you're called to it, then the door is wide open. And so, what happens? People get together in a room. It's quiet. We I explain what we're trying to achieve here. I sing a prayer. Everyone gets a single glass of wine, which they can drink at their leisure in the course of an hour. So this is not about getting drunk.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a shaman in the room, a spiritual practitioner with about 10 or 12 different instruments and shamanic tools. And we all get quiet. We all are directed with it inside ourselves. And he usually does a sort of a prayer in each of the cardinal directions and then proceeds into ceremonial song and dance. All our eyes are closed, and he goes for an hour. And then he brings everybody back to the room through his efforts. And we offer a second glass of wine, and we go for another hour. And then we share a meal together, and we talk about our experience.
Wow. And what are the Google reviews reflective of that, or the conversation afterwards? Do people just go, "Wow, that was amazing"? What's the typical comment after you do this?
Well, everybody has their own experience,
Mm-hmm.
and they're usually deep. Some people are confronted with the pain alcohol has affected in their lives head on. Like if you go within and you've had trouble with alcohol in your life, whether it be a parent or a family member, I mean, sometimes the experience is a painful one. But for most, it's there's a deep feeling of connection to themselves, to each other, to and somewhat of a spiritual experience, of a feeling of wholeness, of peace.
It seems, if you reflect on other beverages, that there's nothing else, and I guess this is part of the definition that we're not trying to define necessarily, but it certainly adds to the mystery of it, that you could do this with anything else. And I always say this, like you can make wine from a lot of things, apricots and pomegranates in Armenia. You can make it from pineapples in Maui, the Maui Blanc, but you can't sit and experience what you're doing with those beverages. You can only do it. And so that always leads to, like, why the grape? Why did God pick the grape as this vehicle, as this tool to connect
And I don't
us?
think we'll ever have that answer.
No. Not till we go.
But just,
not till we're gone.
yeah, I don't think we'll ever have that answer. But it's the recognition that leads me to offer these experiences to others, and to promote this kind of experience.
Not the idea of doing this exact thing, because this thing, I'm sure this event will evolve over time as people do more and you see more results of it and modify it. But like, when did the idea that we should dig a little deeper spiritually with wine occur to you?
Well, I think it's been part of my own spiritual journey. I was introduced to Entheogens probably 20-something years ago through ayahuasca. And, I had some profound experiences. I traveled to Peru, did some work there with a shaman there and some local shamans here in Sonoma County. And it just occurred to me in the course of, I became friends with the local shaman now who hosts our ceremonies, or provide the soundscape, I would say, for our ceremonies. And we were hiking together, and I said, I think wine is an entheogen. And I think that with the right set and setting and the right intention, wine can take us to the same places I've gone in, using other entheogens. And maybe not as dramatic, but certainly with the the right intention set and setting could take us on an inner journey. And he was open to trying it. And so we did it the first time with a group of volunteers, put the word out there that we're going to try this thing. And it was surprisingly effective, surprisingly as expected. And so it just made sense to continue the journey. There's a calling.
Is that a common reaction? Sorry to interrupt you. Is that a common reaction from first timers? Like, wow, I didn't expect any of this.
Yes, I think it's a common response.
And of course, the people that come back realize.
Just think of it. The common use, we all grew up with of alcohol is a social lubricant, or an escape. So to use it instead as a way of carving a path within and becoming more sensitive as opposed to less sensitive is unexpected.
I wonder if that's I go through the day and sometimes I reflect on, I can't wait to get home and have a Burgundy or have a, Pinot or have a Bordeaux or have a California, whatever I crave. I wonder if that's reflective of something in the same regard. In other words, there's something in that wine that my body is saying, I need this relationship. It happens all the time. Now, because we're in the industry, we do this every day. It certainly doesn't happen to most people that they reflect, that they crave a certain character of wine. But maybe it's not the character of the wine. Maybe it's the Entheogen.
So just to be clear, what an entheogen is, okay? So it's a combination of three words, three Greek components. The word en, which means inside, within. Theo, which means God or the sacred, and gen, which means to generate or create. So an entheogen is a substance that generates the God within. And so
right.
What you're suggesting isn't something that I'd considered, but it makes perfect sense to me, is that we have a longing for that connection. And it's
it's not the alcohol. I mean, I could do that anywhere.
Part of the human experience, yeah.
And in fact, when I think about it, my dad taught me how to make gin martinis as a kid, so there are times that when I get home, I just want that because I know that in a few minutes I'll be feeling differently. But that's different than the feeling I get when I'm craving a wine that I know has a different relationship with my humanity than anything else, and then why one over the other we'll never know the answer to that either. But it's the question I've been trying to answer for a long time, and the closest I've ever gotten besides today was with Gisela saying it's just a gift from God, and and we get it, and we're fortunate to have it, and we should relish it and recognize it. That's all.
I think that's exactly what I'm saying too.
And work with it. It is what you're saying. Well, we're out of time, unfortunately, because I think we could talk forever on the idea, and I want to continue to hear what you're doing, and maybe we'll get up there one day. I don't know.
Well, you're welcome.
See what it's about.
I'll send you an invitation. Our next one is August 22nd.
Okay, yeah, send me it off. Just put me on the list so that I know when they're coming. And we are quite up north quite frequently, like I was up recently. But
it's on our website. Anybody who's listening to this can go to our website, halleckvineyard.com, and under events, and they can sign up. It's
Halleck,
right there.
Halleck vineyards or vineyard.
Without an S. Yes.
Vineyard.com.
Mm-hmm.
Really quite interesting and quite revealing, and peeling it back a little bit further than the typical conversation about wine, and that's much appreciated.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
We'll have to thank Eric together.
Okay. I thank him all the time. Yeah, cheers.